It's time to take your seat in the front row with Mike Vaccaro. Here's your host, Mike Vaccaro.
Thank you, Chuck, and welcome once again, everybody. I'm Mike Vaccaro in the front row with Mike Vaccaro up to episode 12 here today. Behind the scenes, as always, it's J.R. Quitman, our creator, producer, and director. Well, a special guest today, special meeting for me. It is Curt Warner. Well, not that one. The running back for the Seattle Seahawks, played at Penn State. He is our guest here today. And also, after his playing days, he'll talk to us about his twin sons and dealing with autism with them and how that has challenged he and his wife, Ana, their marriage, their family. He's got a great book out that he'll talk to us about that as well. So a great story for you today, episode 12. Our guest today, former running back for the Seattle Seahawks and at Penn State as well, Curt Warner. Curt, first of all, thanks so much for joining us. I know it's early in the morning out there on the West Coast as well, and you're just starting your day, and we appreciate you starting it with us here today. And want to get into a lot of different things with you. Obviously, an incredible career, but your life now and your book and your family life that we're going to dive into. But I want to start at the very beginning for you. You know, you're the original Curt Warner. Grew up in West Virginia, Wyoming County, West Virginia, a small town. And you know, what was it like for you growing up in West Virginia?
Well, it's an unincorporated town as well, so we didn't really have that much going on as far as law enforcement and all the other stuff. So a small town, I would say that the advantage of being in a small town is that you know everyone that's in that town. The disadvantage of being in a small town is that you know everyone in that particular town. But it was an interesting community, to say the least. We were sort of on the other side of the tracks, but I had a pretty good size or pretty big family, and we were able to work out our differences on a number of fronts. But just wonderful people that was a part of the community, and it was different, and we functioned accordingly.
And you were raised by your grandparents, is that correct?
I was raised by my grandparents, adopted by my grandparents. So, you know, they were the only parents that you know, that I know and that I dealt with, and I loved them very, very much and dearly. They passed away since then, but they were wonderful parents who taught us a lot about life in general and hard work and all of the things that come into play as parents.
How much was football in your DNA when you were growing up? How much was that the sport that you gravitated to at that time in West Virginia?
You know, I pretty much played everything in season, whether it was baseball or basketball or football. I really loved basketball growing up. My old man was a baseball coach, so I played Little League and Babe Ruth and all the things that come into play when you're playing and dealing with sports. But football was probably, I think, the last thing on the radar as far as being a professional football player. I wasn't really thinking about that as much. I was just trying to not have to go and work inside the coal mines. I think that was my motivation because my old man worked in the coal mines for around 40 years or so. And you could see it takes a toll on you. And that was just one thing that I wasn't really crazy about doing at that particular time. And I wasn't the sharpest guy, you know, on the block. You know, I was a decent, good student. But I understood that it was important to get an education. And that's what I worked towards.
But did you also see the value of athletics as kind of your way out and way to the next level?
Well, that was probably my only way out from my perspective. That was because academically, I wasn't going to be able to pay for a scholarship. I mean, we were in the coal mines, just kind of getting through or getting by. Sorry. So yeah, it became later in life, maybe my sophomore or junior year, it became a tool where I actually thought that it could probably, move me in a different direction. But up until then, I was not sure, to be honest with you.
Were you starting to get recruited at that point? And was it in football or was it other sports that you were getting looked at?
A combination of the sports, but mostly football. I had a brother who's passed away since then. That was he was probably one of the better athletes I've ever been around. He was a lefty and he could just do everything well. And I took a lot of hits from him on and off the court or baseball field or whatever arena it was. So I lost quite a bit, pretty much at everything growing up. But let that not deter you. It actually. It propelled me to the next level because I realized that, hey, I could go and practice and play all the time, and whatever sport we were in at that particular, primarily basketball. That hard work paid off, and that's what I kind of, at an early age realized that, hey, if you want to beat him, you're going to get out here and figure it out. So. And that was my main objective, was to beat him and my cousins because they were hard competitors. It was like a young, a boy playing amongst the men, and that's not a good recipe at times, but it was a good recipe because I learned quite a bit about.
Yeah, I'm sure you look back at your career now, and that's kind of where things started for you to really toughen you up. Again, on the football side, you were recruited.
Yep.
You went to Penn State. Who else was knocking at your door at that time?
Well, Pitt, University of Pitt at that time, which had a very good head coach and good program at that particular time. Nebraska, Notre Dame, West Virginia, the University of West Virginia. So there were quite a few teams or quite a few colleges that were looking to recruit me at the time. I kind of narrowed it down to maybe 4 or 5 or 6 at some point, and then I just kind of focused on that. But I was sold on Penn State early in the process, but just needed to make sure it was the right fit.
Yeah, a chance to stay close to home with a lot of those schools. But why was Penn State the right fit? Obviously, you look back at it now; it certainly was for your career. But why was it the right fit?
Well, number one. It was a place where I see the clips, man. Yeah, who was that guy? So it was from a family perspective, it was easy to get to. So my family could get there. They could drive up. It was about a 6-8 hour drive, but they could get there. Friends could come up. Secondly. And I think just the football in general, we were going to play against some great competition, and that's what we did. We were able to play against some really good competition, and academically, they stressed the fact that, hey, you know what, you're not just here to be an athlete, but you have to go to school, and you got to go to your classes, and if you don't go to your classes, well, guess what? You're going to have to sit in Joe's office with Joe, and that's not a conversation you wanted to have at that particular time. And then third, it was from one of the things that he always told us, he obviously told us a number of things, but you need to be a good student, be a good citizen on campus, and work hard on the practice field, and let's win some big games. So that was kind of the gist of it, and it was a consistent recipe for Coach Paterno, and the guys that were there that I played with, we all understood that this is a privilege to play here, but you need to do your job, do what we ask you to do, go to class, and stay out of trouble, and you'll stay out of Joe's way for those particular items. But it was a great experience, and it's just a wonderful campus. I love the campus. It was a wonderful experience, and I would do it again. So there you have it.
1979 to 1982. Again, you mentioned Joe Paterno there. He seems like kind of a laid back guy, but it sounds like, did he have that tough edge to him if you were in his office at a bad time?
He was a bear. I mean, he loosened up later in his coaching career. And I remember going back there after, and he was a different guy. He was talkative. He was patting these guys on the back. He was giving them big hugs and so on and so forth. And I'll tell you, it was different from that perspective. But he learned to adjust. He learned to get along with others. So. And become a better coach when it comes to understanding what the mentality was between the 1979 and 82 and then the 90s and then 2000. He made the adjustment. He got along with these guys. He was able to adapt, and that right there is unusual for a coach who is somewhat set in his ways. To now have to adjust and be less of an enforcer, because with us, I mean, if I fumbled on the other side of the field, he was out in the middle of the field, kind of watching everything. One field over here and one field over there. He would come screaming across that field at you or anybody else that was not doing what they were supposed to do. And we all knew he was going to do it, but you just didn't want to be on the other end of that. But come to find out, the reason why he did that was, and he did it during certain weeks, certain games where maybe the competition wasn't going to be as difficult, as other teams that we may be playing. So he would work more. So in those particular games, and getting us ready mentally. By his antics, and you find out later that you don't have to worry about certain games, but there are certain games that he needs to step in and do his job, and that is to make you aware of the fact that you can get beat if you're out here lollygagging around. So
making sure you guys stayed on the edge and stayed focused. So different tactics back in that day. Well, I'm sure you didn't draw his ire too much. I mean, again, you were the leading rusher. 3 years, 1980, 1981, 1982. What made you so successful as a running back for Penn State?
Well, we had some really good athletes up front. You got by the name of Mike Munchak, Sean Farrow, and we had a passing game as well with Todd Blackledge and so on and so forth. So, there were a lot of different. There were athletes on the team. Very good athletes on the team. And we were fortunate. I was fortunate enough to just be able to play with guys who could absolutely do their job, and I was able to, to take advantage of their abilities inside the trenches and also down the field. So it was a combination of everything. That's why you call it teamwork, right? It is one of those kind of things where everybody has to kind of play together.
Let's talk about 1983, a national championship year for you guys with the Sugar Bowl championship. And it was a day, a time before the playoffs and everything else. And it wasn't as cut and dry who that national champion was going to be. Yeah. Right. But you're number 2. Georgia's number 1. You go to the Sugar Bowl feeling like the winner of this is going to be that national championship. What was that moment like for you guys?
Well, I think the ultimate objective for us as a football team was to win the national championship. That's why we were there. And Penn State had knocked on the door on numerous occasions, like in 1979, where they were on the 1-yard line against Alabama and could not get that ball in the end zone. That just had to just wear on Paterno, Coach Paterno and the staff and everything else. So, that's a tough pill to swallow. At that particular time, we lost against Alabama we just didn't have a whole lot of success against Alabama for whatever reason. So we had lost about mid-year, and we dropped down to number 6. Okay, so and like you said, the national championship game wasn't as clear cut as it is today. So as we kept playing week in and week out, somebody in that top 4 or 5 echelon would lose, and then we would creep up another spot, and then somebody would lose, and then we would creep up another spot. And by the time we had hit the last game of the season against Pitt, we were in a situation as to where we were number 3, SMU was number 2, and I think Pitt or somebody was number 1. So we ended up beating Pitt. SMU ended up tying in their game, and I still get flack from SMU guys like Eric Dickerson and so on and so forth about who should have won that national championship or who should have been a part of that national championship game. But that's neither here nor there. So we ended up winning against Pitt. Georgia was in the mix as well. They may have been number 1. I can't remember exactly, but we ended up leapfrogging over SMU to number 2. And that's kind of how it happened. So we stayed the course. We were fortunate, and it's just the chips fell in the right places at the right times, and we were able to make a run. But we had to keep winning. We couldn't, we were not afforded the ability to lose at that particular time. But we're very fortunate. And we were able to win a national championship, and we're very proud of that with regards to just a team effort in general.
Yeah, 27-23, the win over Georgia. You had, 2 touchdowns, 117 rushing yards in that game, a big game for you. Greg Garrity with basically the winning touchdown pass from Tom Blackledge as well. Do you still get along with those guys, meet with those guys, do anything with them? Such a meaningful moment in your life?
Well, Todd and I were roommates for 3 years. So, yes, we still are in communication. Just a great friend and tremendous quarterback. And he was an integral part of us winning the national championship. And we're still good friends. And we reminisce about that from time to time. But, it's one of those things that it's always going to be there. I think that's the key. How are you going to be remembered when it's all said and done? Because there's going to be a lot of teams, a lot of years. Every year, somebody's going to go out there and they're going to represent your school. They're going to represent the Nittany Lions, but we get to have a mark up there that not very many of them can say. Now, there were a number of games that Penn State could have been the national championship, could have been national champions when they went undefeated a couple of times and still were not, given the crown. But that's neither here nor there. So we can only claim what we're going to claim, and that is we won the national championship in '82.
Yeah, the very first national championship for Penn State. You were a 2-time All-American, and you left there with 42 records as well. How do you look back at that now, all these years removed, to see again you individually, the mark that you left on Penn State?
Well, records are meant to be broken, and it was a great honor to have 42 records while I was there. But they're not going to last forever. So you expect someone to break it at some time, and I don't have a problem with that. I'm not going to wish any ill, give them the old, sabotage them and all that other stuff. But it was a great honor, and I was just fortunate enough to be at a great university with just super athletes who knew what to do and how to do it, and we were able to take on those challenges on a regular basis.
Again, winning the national championship was different then than it is now. I'm sure the draft was different then than it is now as well. So 1983 comes around. You're drafted 3rd behind John Elway and Eric Dickerson. You're drafted by the Seattle Seahawks.
Right.
How did you find out about that? How'd that all, go down?
Well, there was no green room. I can tell you that much. And ESPN was not available with with all of the things that go on the play. My agent was a guy by the name of Marvin Demoff, who's had his stamp on a number of guys like Elway and Marino and so on and so forth. So he was kind of in the middle of that, working, the channels, the back channels, and I don't know all of the details behind it, and et cetera, et cetera. And I really did not think that I was going to be a part of the Seahawks organization because they were number 9. And I was told, who knows, but I was told, not necessarily by anybody in particular, that, by the Seahawks, and I talked to some of their guys, or they had met them at whatever. It wasn't even a camp. We were like there to get physicals, and we didn't do any type of working out or anything like that. But I was told that I would not be around for them. So, okay. But I really didn't have any idea as to where I was going to play or where I was going to be picked. I literally just had no idea until the day before. And then I got a call from Marvin, and he says, hey, Seahawks are going to move up and take you. And then I had met with Chuck Knox earlier during the springtime. He came up to the campus, and I had lunch with he and his lovely wife, Shirley, and we just kind of talked. And I didn't really think much of it. Yeah, would you be interested in playing for the Seattle Seahawks? Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay, no problem. You want to draft me? I will play for you. That's not a problem. But I didn't think much of it, to be honest with you. It was just, it was lunch, and they were nice people, and he seems like a really good coach, and did a little research on him, and he was ground chuck. He likes to run the football, and I'm like, yeah, I can tote the ball, no problem. So let's do it. But again, I had no idea that was going to take place or that was going on behind the scenes. So,
as you said, part of going to Penn State was staying close to home. Well, going to Seattle was going far away from home. Had you been that far away from home?
No, not at all. Not ever. So, the first thing you do is you get the map out and you go like, oh my, this is on the other side of the world. And that's pretty much what I was thinking. But, you're drafted and that's where you're going to go. And I almost, I'll go one step back and mention the fact that the USFL was coming into play at that time as well. And I was being recruited on that front for the Philadelphia team. Philadelphia Stars, I think. Yep. That was the name of it. And I had gone and talked with them a couple of times about playing in the USFL. But here was my dilemma. I just got finished with a college football season in January, and they wanted us to start in March, I think, in the springtime. And I was just like, I don't think I want to do that. I mean, it sounds like a league that could make a run at the NFL, and that's what they were trying to do, but it's not the NFL. You can't make a run at the NFL. So I declined on that front, and then that obviously opened the door for the NFL draft.
Yeah, the Stars actually, I think, won the first couple of USFL championships as well. I think that Kelvin Bryant was the running back.
Yes, very good running back.
So you gave way for that. And again, you took the offer with the Seahawks, and a really, really good rookie season for you. 1983, you were the AFC rushing champion. Again, Seattle was in the AFC at that time, not the NFC.
AFC, so. Yes, that's right, AFC.
So for you, it would seem like it was an easy transition going from the college level to the pro level. Was it as easy as it looked?
No. The pro level, you're basically shedding things down. So when you go high school, you may be an outstanding athlete in high school, and then they will sort of, sort things out. When you go to a university. So the numbers are always shrinking, right? So as the numbers shrink from high school and I'm talking when I say shrink, shrink means that you're sort of figuring out who's going to play and who isn't going to play. And that's fair. On the football field or any other sport, there's going to come a point when you've got to jump to the next level or move to the next level, and then you're going to figure out kind of where you are. The NFL will fool you because you have basically narrowed it down to the best of the best. And it's a hard thing to get your hands around until you actually get out there and intermingle in a practice. And what I realize is, there's a lot of guys out here who are very good athletes, and the game it's faster, it's quicker, everything is at a more intense pace, and things can get crazy out there. So I think by playing at Penn State and playing against the competition that we did, I think mentally and physically, it gave me the ability to at least match at that level. But there are other things that come into play that you have to take into account. And that is, number one, can you learn the playbook? And number two, after you learn the playbook, can you adjust when you're actually in the play? And, with Knox, he gave me the ability to make my decision once I got the football. He would say, hey, run the daylight and run one of the ain't. So he didn't really have a specific area. You go to the point of attack, and then you're either going to go left or you're going to go right. But you have to determine that's your call. Once the ball got in my hands, then I had the ability to do whatever I wanted to do. And that is go left or go right or see the field or be able to run with your eyes more so than just plowing up in there and trying to take these guys on that way, because that's just not going to work.
Yeah, you were always such a good cutter, and that was kind of your calling card as well. And you mentioned that there, that it's your decision. So you use that skill. Where did that skill come from? Were you always like that on the football field?
Yeah. I guess to a certain degree. Oh, that hurt. Yes, I can see that.
That's the injury.
Yeah. Well, you just messed up my whole train of thought on that one. So.
We'll get to that, unfortunately.
No, it's one of those things where you learn to do it after you learn it. You just figure it out at the point of attack. What are you going to do? And as the game progresses along, and I had the ability to get out of the way, to make those sharp cuts. And that's just a God-given ability to be able to see it and to be able to react to it and then be able to make it happen. So those are the elements that you have to hone in on. And I can't teach you that by the educational process. You just have to get out there and sort of figure it out.
Well, again, the offensive rookie of the year that year in the AFC, and then we saw there in 1984. So you're coming off a great year, your rookie year, season opener 1984, and one of those cuts that again we just talked about. Your knee gives way. What was that moment like, and what's going through your mind at that moment?
Well, I just know that it hurt, and it was one of those situations where the body was going one way and the foot and the shoe was going a different way, and something had to give. That turf that we were playing on, that stuff should be outlawed. It should be illegal, in my opinion. And I'm glad that they've made the adjustments here and there. But had that have been on grass, which we should have been playing on grass, everyone should have been playing on grass, then you don't have that situation, because my foot would have dug in, and something would have happened, but it would have been the shoe, the cleat. And I can't even watch that, so it's just tough to watch. With that being said, I'm glad to see that they have changed the surfaces. that particular surface. It's a turf, but it's a little bit more forgiving. And it's like, the stuff that we were playing on, it's like playing on concrete. That's really what we're playing on, because when you peel it back and peel it up, you got a little pad underneath it, and it's like playing on concrete. And but what are you going to say? It's the game. You got to play the game. You got to play the hand you're dealt, and that's the hand that we were dealt. And unfortunately, things do happen. And that was the first time that I was injured to that degree where I had to go under the knife. In my career, I had 6 operations, bone spurs, knee reconstruction, and a number of things that, mostly, with the lower extremities. So it takes away your ability to play the game. And you're the last one to figure that out, and I was. I was the last one to figure that out. Okay, it's time for you to go somewhere else, because the mind inside, you still can think a certain way, but the body just can't. It can't take you in that direction. So that's a tough thing to have to deal with when you're fired for the first time. And I laugh about it now, but at the time it was very difficult.
Well, let's talk about the injury, though, because obviously you've got the physical scars, but mentally, like you said, it was the first time you had been injured to that degree. How hard was it? And an ACL injury back in the 80s, different than an ACL injury now as far as the rehab and coming back and how quickly you can come back.
Well, I had a great doctor, a guy by the name of Pierce Scranton, who had talked to me on numerous occasions about the operation and what took place. And, he technically, I can't obviously explain it, but he said he made some other adjustments to fixing my knee. And he says, Curt, as far as I know, as far as I'm concerned, your knee is stable. And the rest of the work is going to be up to you. Okay. All right. Because I didn't think that it was a career-ending injury, because he told me that it wasn't a career-ending injury, and he said he had fixed it. And he says, Curt, I can assure you that it is fixed. It is stable. Now, I'm going to test it at some point to see. And I would say over that following year, from 83 on to 84, to when the season started again, I tested it on numerous occasions. I had, I was at the facility with Jimmy Weitzel and John Kasich, our trainers at the time, pretty much every day working to rehab for about 8 hours a day. So I was down there pretty much every day, all the time, from when I was on the crutches to when I actually got back on the field and started playing again. So it was a long process that you don't really know until that practice or that game day or whatever happened. You're not really sure as to whether or not you're going to be at the same level you were before you got hurt. And I would think that for the most part, I was able to get back to that level. You're never going to be 100%, but I'll take 95%. I'll take 97%. But I think I was able to get back out there and play at a high level, and that's the most important thing for me was, can I get back out there and play at a very high level? And I think I was able to do that for the most part.
Yeah, Pro Bowler in 1986 and 1987, so you did get back, even if you weren't 100%, you got back to a pretty good level at that point. And then, as you said, you got fired in your terms. So you were a free agent, and in 1990, like you said, you still wanted to play, and unfortunately for you, you had to go elsewhere. That elsewhere was with the Rams. And I know, looking at stuff from you elsewhere, that was a tough pill to swallow, and it was maybe some hurt feelings as well.
That's. And I will say this now, but I wouldn't say it then. Don't make life lesson. don't make an emotional decision, especially when you're dealing with your ego. Probably should have stayed where I was because I was winding down my career, whether I knew it or not, and I ended up leaving. I think I still would have been done anyway, but hindsight's always 20/20. I made the decision. I can live with it, but if it was a decision that I regret. I regret at this time that I made. I should have just stayed there and just worked through it and kind of went down that road, but I didn't. So there you have it.
Fences kind of mended a little bit in 1994 when you were inducted into the Ring of Honor?
The fences. Yeah, we're good now. The fences has been mended. That one thing you learn about business, and I was a business owner for a number of years, so I it's not personal. And Coach Knox used to say that to us all the time. Business is business. This is not personal. Well, it does get personal, but the question is, how long are you going to hang on to it? I mean, at some point you got to let it go and say, okay, you made a business decision. I didn't like it, so let's move on. And the only way you learn that is that you have to transition over, get into the business world, and that it really wasn't personal. So from that perspective, I go, it wasn't personal, and friends, let's bury the hatchet and move forward. So,
and you still live, Pacific Northwest as well, and still tied with the organization quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm in the Ring of Honor, so it's all good. Seahawks is a great organization. I don't have any ill will towards them, and we have a very good relationship. So that's the way I see it.
So toward the end of your career is kind of when you met your wife, Ana. Is that correct? And you guys started dating, and watching something about you. Harold Reynolds was important in your first date. Is that correct? You tell us that story?
Yeah. Harold, I was, the date was not going very well. We were in a place where I really couldn't hear anything. It was the first date. And then I called Harold up, or we were talking, and he says, hey, I'll come down and I'll take care of it for you. So we went down there, he came over and he says, let's go to a quieter place, and so on and so forth. And we went to a quieter place and we were able to talk. And I said, okay, Harold, I don't think I need you any longer, so you can lay down. But he did save us. There's no doubt about that.
And I heard your wife thought that football players were big and stupid. So obviously you had some work to do to convince her otherwise.
Yeah, I did. And it took a little while to get her on board, but to convince her that we were not all that way. But no, I'm glad that she gave me an opportunity to see otherwise, or to test the waters otherwise, and so on and so forth. So we're still married today. So things have worked out fairly well.
And I know it's been challenging. It hasn't been easy, as we're going to look at kind of the second half of your life here with your family. And unfortunately for you, it starts in 1991. You guys are pregnant, ready to have your first child, and that doesn't happen. How difficult was that moment for you guys?
Well, I mean, it was extremely difficult due to the fact that we were, a day or so away from having our first son. And then she said, hey, he's not been very active today. He's not moving at all. So we went over to the doctor, and because, obviously we called him and said, hey, we're concerned. He's not moving. And we didn't think much of it at the time. It's like, okay, let's go get things checked out. And he poked around, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but he kind of got the scope thing out and started listening to the heartbeat, and said that it doesn't seem to be, the heart is not beating. Well, what do you mean? It's not good. So, that was it was a long day, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 days where you go into the hospital. We ended up having our son. She ended up going through the pregnancy process, and now he had the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck, and that's just nothing. I mean, what do you do? What can you do? Nothing, other than the fact that you have to bury your son. So very difficult process for us to have to deal with, but we're thankful to the good Lord that he kept us he kept us at bay, he kept us moving forward. But it was a very difficult process to get through, and it's still a tough topic to discuss.
I can certainly tell, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. So 1993, then Jonathan is born. I mean, what were your reservations? Getting pregnant again. I mean,
Yeah.
again, it's no matter what happens, it's always risky, and you're always worried. But coming off of what you just went
Yeah.
through, how difficult was it, that decision to decide? Okay, let's try again.
Well, the decision to try again, it just took time, number one. And, we wanted a family. We realized that the hand that we were dealt at that time it just didn't work out at the end. But so we decided to go through the process again. And, and as you mentioned, a high risk pregnancy. And I think because we were in that particular situation, our doctor was more than active in the process. I mean, we were in there quite a bit checking things out, which was fine with us. So, and then we were obviously blessed to have our first son, Jonathan, and then from there we two more, Austin and Christian. And then we ended up adopting our daughter, Isabella, who was just a wonderful, sweet teenager. How about that? Teenager.
Dad of a teenage daughter. I'm sure that's going well for you, right?
Oh, yeah, we have our moments. But she's a wonderful, wonderful adult, young adult, a teenager. And we have our moments, but we're able to, deal with it. Sometimes it's me, sometimes it's my wife, but we're able to work it out.
Well, let's talk about the boys, the twins. As you said, Austin and Christian, born in 1994, but in 1999, 5 years old, diagnosed as autistic. So tell us about that, because again, this is the 90s. Autism wasn't as well known about it at that point. You knew kind of something was wrong, but you weren't sure exactly what it was.
No, as far as autism was concerned, we had no idea. We just knew that there were behavior issues, and they were not normal when it comes atypical. I would say normal. Because that in the autism community, that can be somewhat debated. So I don't want to get into a big debate about this, that, or other anything else. I mean, we describe it in our book in such a way. I think it's better than what I could probably talk about it. But they had behavior issues, and we just really could not figure out. They didn't sleep very much. They were always active, and not necessarily neurotypical active. Like we talk about it in the book, where we had one stretch where Christian was banging his head on the floor so darn hard. It was just unbelievable to think that he hasn't, don't have any brain damage. We had to get a helmet to put it on him. So there was just a number of things that were going on that we just could not even imagine, because we had Jonathan, our oldest, sitting here and not seeing those particular behaviors, but I got to here and we're seeing abnormal behaviors in comparison to him, but we had no idea as to why or what or how, and how to fix it, because we all want to try to make our children feel better when they're in a situation that is uncomfortable, and you know it, and they're not really talking that much because they're not communicating, or not communicating in such a way that we can understand what they're saying. So we have a lack of that, and we just don't really know what it is. So we had to keep trying to figure it out and meeting with different doctors about certain things. And my wife is, you got to give her a lot of credit, because once we realized what it was, she kind of went to work. And I had a friend of mine who was one of my managers at the dealership, who says, "Hey, I got someone who may be able to help figure out what's going on." And that was kind of what started that whole autism thing. And she sat there and observed them for about 5 minutes. And this was, I think it was Austin. And after about 5 minutes, she said, I think he has autism. And I was like, well, what is autism? So, it's in the book. I won't go into the details of it, because if I did, we'd be sitting here talking for quite some time. But the bottom line is that they were diagnosed in '99, and we're in the year 2021, and they still have autism. But we love them unconditionally. We love our children, and we're going to do what's best for them and try to help them live a productive life.
Hey, you saw the book there, published in 2018, available still. Was it therapeutic to write that book? Because it's an interesting book where it's chapters from you, chapters from your wife as well, to kind of have both of your perspectives. How did the book come about, and were you hesitant at all about writing a book like that?
Well, it was my idea to write the book, and I kept saying to myself, I said, it's just this. You can't believe it. It was hard to believe what was going on, from the standpoint of every day something was happening, and it just wasn't typical. So it's hard to describe. And I said, we need to write this down somewhere. We need to put this in words, so that it helps us deal with it, but maybe there are others out there who are going through the same thing, because you have 1 in 44 right now who are being diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And I am a national board member of the Autism Society of America, just so you know that. So, I get a pretty good idea as to what's going on, from a national perspective. But this is something that it's not going away anytime soon, and there really doesn't seem to be a cure or even a diagnosis that would even tell you that there is possibly an issue. I think people are aware of it, of autism and the spectrum of autism, and so I think we've done a very good job of making it more prevalent. Because at the time, I mean, you tell somebody they have autism, they just look at you and go, "This is back in the '90s." They just look at you and say, "Well, you need to do a better job of dealing with your kids. It's a parenting issue." Yeah, right. It's a family issue. You're not a very good parent. And my wife, she went through this for years, thinking that it was her fault. And then, at some point, the doctor will say, or the therapist will say, it's not your fault. It's just something that happened. But you got 1 in 44, getting back to my train of thought here, 1 in 44 that are on the spectrum. And there are a lot of families who are struggling out there with their children or their young adults. And it's just one of those things where, the alarm bells are going to go off, because these children are going to be young adults just like my guys are. And then what are we going to do about it? and how are we going to deal with it? Because some parents are just so darn tired because you have severe, it may be severe on the spectrum. It may not be severe on the spectrum. And the question is, how are we going to deal with this particular issue? And I don't think there's any answers for that right now. And we need to be finding and searching for answers when it comes to dealing with autism.
And I know maybe you had the relief of knowing, getting a diagnosis, but you guys kind of withdrew for quite some time as well during all this time, right? So that couldn't have been easy, where it's just you guys almost on an island by yourselves. How difficult was it? And then, how taxing was that on your marriage?
Well, I mean, statistically, you're looking at about 60 to 70% of those families who are on the spectrum that are, that are getting a divorce to a certain degree because fingers are being pointed at each other. It's your fault. No, it's his fault. How could this have happened? It's got to be your fault. I think our faith in Christ, our Lord, that has been the foundation of how we are dealing with things. It doesn't always mean that we're going to be on our best behavior because you're basically reacting to a lot of different things, and we've been able to get the support that's needed to deal with this on a regular basis. But getting back to your comment about being on an island or being isolated, it wasn't by choice. We didn't choose to be isolated. But when I invite you over, Mike, and you see all of the damage that's done in my house, then you got to be wondering what is going on over here, and what are you guys doing? Why is this happening? From a typical perspective, you're going to come in and go like, man, they're horrible parents. They let their kids just punch holes in the walls and all the other stuff, and all of this activity going on. And so you go, well, I can't have people over here thinking that way about us as a husband and wife and a family and so on and so forth. So you just kind of, you shut down. You just kind of pull in the reins and deal with it. But it's not by choice. We didn't want to do it, but that was just the way it was. And I'm not necessarily proud of it, but sometimes you have to do what you have to do. Now, are we that way now? Not nearly as much, but it does take a toll on you, and it takes a toll on a marriage, and you have to be committed in that marriage, and you have to love one another and support each other regardless. And for the guys, I would say to them, look, even if you don't know anything about it, just get in, get your hands dirty. Say, hey, what can I do to help? What do I need to do to help? Because you can't put the whole onus on the wife and then blame her and say, well, it's your fault. You're not a very good parent. That's not the right thing to do. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned in this whole
thing. I mean, and again, those lessons in your book, I take away a lot of good stuff from that. As a husband and a father of two children as well, that again, life's lessons that you can learn whether your kids are autistic or not. You're guys now 27 years old, I guess, and what's their status now?
They are in Ellensburg right now, and we're in the process of transitioning them to it's a home in which they live in. It's how do I say it? But anyway, it's a home for young adults with disability issues that come into play, like a private care facility that they all live in. You got about 3 or 4 people that live in that particular environment. And so the housing part of it, you have to deal with that part of it. And then there's and I know I'm not describing it very good, but it's kind of tough to explain. And then there's the Trellis Center, which is an educational vocational center for those who are on the spectrum and others with disabilities, that they're able to go in and learn and be educated and to deal with those behaviors that may come into play. So it's complicated, but that's kind of where they're at, and that's where we're at this particular time. So it's been a good move on our part, but it's taken some time to get to that point.
And I know something else I watched with you. You talked about house parents there and looking for some support. How can people help out? Not just with your sons, but other people. Families with kids that are in those situations and in that facility.
Yeah, that's a good question. And if your relatives or of friends or relatives of a brother or sister or cousin or something of that nature, don't be afraid to go in and offer your help. See what you can do, because there are just times when they call it respite. You just need a break, and don't shy away from it. That would be my advice: is don't shy away from it. If you've got a brother or a sister or a family member that may be going through something and you hear the word autism, see what you can do. Pitch in and ask, what can you do to help and support, instead of, because they're going to isolate themselves for the most part, because it's just a tough thing to have to explain, a tough thing to have to do. And I still have a hard time, explaining it from time to time as far as the plan and where we're at. But my wife is, she's on task, and between the both of us, we're able to sort of, and the support of the friends, we're able to kind of move forward.
As you said, you're on the Autism Foundation there and do some speaking. What else are you doing today? How else can people maybe follow you as well in what you're doing post NFL and playing career?
I don't know. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn and all of the other things and I kind of, I don't do the social media that much, because that's just I just don't. Right. But I don't know what to tell you on that front with regards to supporting. You could support the Autism Society of America. That would be a good starting point. The Trellis Center, that would be a good starting point. Any type of setting that may be dealing with those with disabilities, if you could support in that arena, I would encourage you to do so, because families are struggling, and it's tough to do that. And you can still, you're struggling with atypical children. So even trying to deal with them and both can be even more challenging on a number of fronts.
And holiday time, was that more stressful for you guys? Was there a time of year that was more, put some more stress on you guys as a family, as a husband and wife with your kids?
Not necessarily. It's just we were on alert pretty much all year round, and I laugh because you've got to learn to laugh, or you're going to be crying quite a bit. So I don't mean to be evasive, but it's really just hard to explain it. That's why we wrote the book, and we wrote it from different perspectives. I think my wife does a much better job of explaining it than I did, because it took, he had to pry information out of me at times when I'm like, I don't really want to talk about that, because it's too painful to talk about. It's like, I don't want to talk about that any longer. And I have that mindset. There are times where I'm overly optimistic, but sometimes it's more of a defense than it is anything else, because I just don't want to deal with the reality of what I have to deal with. But it's a delaying tactic, but I know I got to deal with it. So there's there's no real at this particular juncture. There's no real right answer to it. It just support means quite a bit to the family and what they're going through, and I just hope at some point that we can at least slow down the process of the diagnosis and get focused on some of the things that we can do to help as a family, but as Americans, because there's all kinds of things that people are dealing with and struggling with, and you see it every day, and it's just there's a lot to deal with and to take in at that time. So.
Well, again, it seems like you and your wife have done an amazing job to keep it all together. I highly recommend the Warner Boys. Anybody who wants to read that, whether you have children with autism or anything else, or as you said, just a parent of kids is difficult these days in 2021. So great messages, and again, I enjoyed that, and there it is, there the book, The Warner Boys, and it's great that it's not just you. It's you and your wife, Ana, perspectives on both sides. And it's just really, really eye-opening as well. So I would recommend that book to anybody. And Curt,
thank you, Mike. We appreciate that, man. We really do.
Yeah, and I appreciate
you've asked some good questions, and you made me think about quite a few things. So it looks like you did do your homework and your research, and I appreciate that. And I apologize if I wasn't able to answer all your questions. But sometimes I can be evasive at times. So,
well, some of them are difficult questions to answer, and I appreciate you being honest. Again, some of the things you've dealt with in your life have not been the easiest. It's one thing to see you on the field, but certainly off the field has not been the easiest. But it's great to see you and your family there smiling and back at not the Kingdom, but back in Seattle. As you said, the Kingdom was a tough place. But
yeah,
I can't thank you enough for joining us here today. I hope you and your family have a wonderful holiday. And again, I hope that folks watching this will go out, get that book, and again, learn about your career, but learn about the challenges of just raising kids with autism and raising kids in general.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that, Mike.
Well, again, my thanks to Curt Warner for joining us in episode 12. Special thanks to previous guest Steve Rabel, the voice of the Seahawks, for helping connect us with Curt. We certainly appreciate great stories there. The film clips we saw provided by NFL Films, and also the Penn State footage from Barry Paterno. We thank you for providing that footage. And again, check out his book, The Warner Boys, in stores now. Great story, great life that he has lived, but certainly great messages that he's sending out there as well, talking about autism with his sons. Again, we thank you for joining us here today. If you like what you see, like it and subscribe. We'll have more episodes coming up shortly in the front row with Mike Vaccaro. Have a great day, everybody.